How's it going, everyone? Javita here with a bit of a combo video. First off, I want to show off this awesome Jurassic Boundless kind of little theme park over here. But following that, I'm also going to do a kind of a shakedown on useful bits from the debugging menu. So first off, we have the sign right here basically stating that this is a tribute / thank you for the pre-1.0 gameplay and worlds, and which is pretty awesome. So right off the bat, we have this crazy kind of I don't know, like caveman kind of Oort. I mean, you know, it's kind of a more savage version of my player model is kind of what it reminds me of, but it's pretty awesome. And you walk right through its mouth and immediately you're greeted by this awesome frozen cuddle trunk right here. It's pretty amazing. Off to the sides there's other awesome statue type things. So we have a wild stock right here. This one took me a little bit to see, but right here it says adult roadrunner, and you can kind of see like, okay, there's a beak up here, some plumage, foot down here, there's some tail feathers that, yeah, there you go. So it's like it's still not quite chiseled out of the ice just yet, so that's pretty awesome. And then over here, I believe all of these are done by Zina. For the exception of this one right here, it's done by Amanda Pan, it looks like, and it is the skeleton of a baby roadrunner. So that is pretty amazing. And that is one thing I have a hard time wrapping my head around. Is it's like these are awesome builds, but then they're also set on a 45-degree angle. So suddenly if you want to make a flat surface, you're like, okay, does that need to be sloped? Or I don't know, it just seems like it would add a layer of complexity that I'm not used to working with. Maybe I should try it one of these days. But also set on a 45-degree angle, we have this amazing spitter over here. So yeah, it's like if you want to make a nice flat surface, that's actually a sloped block. So yeah, it adds a different twist on the chiseling experience to build on a 45-degree angle like that, but still amazing. Of course, the spitter is spitting, and which brings us right around to this awesome hopper. Just looks very nice. Looks like he's about to explode with all the red and yellow orange gleam. I guess there's no red gleam, it's all orange and yellow, so but still pretty amazing. Let's see here. Yeah, hopper by Zina. And then there's also a sign over here. Ooh, it's dark, can't see it. Do you dare go inside? So you can actually climb inside of this cuddle trunk. And whoop, oh. So did you crap yourself? So yeah, there is oh yeah, I don't have my grapple equipped. There we go. So yeah, if you come around the corner and you kind of panic and jump, there is a possibility you would jump over the portal and into the lava. So be a little bit careful coming down here. If you just kind of go along for the ride, there's not really anything to worry about. Misadventure. It looks like Zina is also taking some donations over here. You can buy a block for 10 coins. It is just ice, so really it is a donation just kind of to help facilitate the transaction. But yeah, that pretty well covers that bit of the video. So let's kind of go over the debugging menu. So if you're unfamiliar with the debugging menu, you can hit F1 by default. I believe you can go into the control settings or the key binding settings and change that button if you want to, but that will pop this little menu up here. Click on that and then you can head over to debugging information, which will pop that window up. Also up here there's some other interesting stuff like the latency graph and the frame time. I mean, I guess if you're having latency issues, this is kind of interesting. I'm not 100% sure what all these different lines actually mean, but down here is kind of, I guess, the stuff that matters. It's probably like one of these would be the web socket and the UDP or something like that. Yeah, I'm no networking expert. I know WebSocket's faster and the UD something or another is a little bit slower, so I think that handles like chunk downloading yeah, not my specialty. Also down here we have frame time, so if you actually do the math, this will equal out to be about 50 frames a second, or 60 frames a second, excuse me. At least that's what Steam tells me I'm getting, and yeah, this is like one frame every 17.5 milliseconds. So that kind of indirectly gives your FPS. And yeah, it's kind of more for the devs than players, obviously, but there's some absolute gems in this debugging menu that is extremely useful for players. So number one, my favorite use for the debugging menu is kind of scroll down just a tad bit. It says player game position right here. These are the coordinates of your actual player, so you can resize this to show only the position. You can hit F1 to turn that menu off, and now you can run around and you know what your elevation is, your coordinates, and mainly it's the elevation that is extremely useful, because if you're trying to mine for a particular resource and you know the altitude that it favors, this is invaluable for staying within that altitude, inside of that altitude range. So very nice. One thing you have to remember, if you use the tilde key to make your mouse show, you do have to hit F1 again to make it interactable, basically. We can expand this back out, and up here we have the game version, username, all that type of stuff. There's even tell you what direction you're facing, so if you don't have the compass unlocked, you could kind of say that's a little bit of cheating. You could use this as a compass. And down here we have some more information on our player. Not hugely useful, but kind of interesting to see that I have a maximum of 5,666 HP, and that, yeah, I'm still not completely regenerated from that death. There's also that angle that kind of gives you an idea, like, let's see here, 0 should be north, and then positive 90 is what, east, so negative 90 will be west, and 180-ish will be south. So again, not that useful to the player. Coming down here is another nice little gem for players. Basically, you can see right here, here's the players, it's under game state, and this gives you a list of all the connected players to the actual server / world. They're essentially the same thing. So come over here, you can also see how many players are connected via a portal right here. So you can see that there's 3 players on the other side of this portal, which is Munting 7. Hop through here, and now you can see what players those actually are. It looks like somebody else just popped into this server, so pretty awesome. And you can also see some information about how many plots you have, but yeah, you kind of should already know that information. Coming down here, we have some more information on networking, and yeah, let's see here. There's the WebSocket I was talking about earlier, and okay, UDP. I don't remember what I was saying earlier, but I knew I was gonna butcher it either which way. But yeah, you can see information on each one of these, and yeah, not really that useful unless you're having network issues. There's also this histogram over here, so you can see that basically 100% of my time is spent, under 150 milliseconds of latency, so that's pretty awesome. If I'd go to like the Australian servers, it might get more up into the 300s, and actually Boundless runs really well even with quite a bit of latency, as long as it's consistent. So if it's like jumping all over the place, that seems to be where it runs into issues. So if you just really wanted to keep a good idea of what your latency is doing, there's a nice little chart for that. Moving on to chunks, you can obviously find some information about chunk data. Not really a whole lot of useful information to the average player here. Coming over here to selection, there's some pretty interesting stuff over here. Something I just discovered actually when I was preparing to make this video is right here. It gives you the block shape of whatever you're looking at. So I'm looking at this wood and you can see that it says it's a full block and then north. Not really sure why it says north. I thought maybe it'd be kind of orientation of the block. As you can see, this metamorphic decorative block, it's going this direction, still says north. Come over here, it still says north. So it doesn't really have to do with rotation, but where this really comes in handy is it gives a unique name to each of the chiseled shapes. So you can see this one is beveled and it's got an L for, I really don't know what, honestly. And here, this one's called a beveled edge. And here is a bevel. Oh, okay, I think the L stands for low because it's the lower half of this block. And then out to the side here, it has 3 Ys, and this has to do with the rotation of the actual block. So you could have the same shape with a different rotation. And so I'm assuming that means it's rotated 3 times from whatever the starting location is considered. On the y-axis. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that is my guesstimation for the time being. Over here you can see there's a bevel, corner step, z, y, so presumably that's rotated on the z and y-axis once. Over here, here's a bevel, it's got another L, so let's take a look at this. Yeah, the L might mean something else, I'm not 100% sure, but then it's got 3 Ys, a Z, and then another Y, so yeah, a little bit more interpreting needs to happen there probably. But the awesome thing about this is that you can use the debugging menu to kind of pick apart and figure out how something is made. So this is actually made with a beveled chisel, so this ramp, while it looks perfectly smooth, is alternating this this bevel edge and then this bevel diagonal step. So instead of using the slope chisel to do just one block to make a slope, it's actually a combination of 2 different beveled slopes in order to make this. Also, you can see the coordinates of the block that you're looking at, as well as the local block position or its position in the actual chunk. If you're unfamiliar, chunks are a collection of 4 plots in a 2x2 square, and they extend all the way up to the top of the world, all the way down to the bottom of the world. And another handy bit of information that you can see here is the color index. So obviously this is sand, but it's color index 50. So if you wanted to set up a request basket to buy this particular color of sand, that would be the color index you would need to choose. So pretty awesome. So scrolling down a little bit and coming to beacon, we have all sorts of awesome information as far as the beacon. So you can see right up top is the base prestige, and this is simply the total of all the prestige values of all the blocks inside of this beacon. So if you're unfamiliar, each one of these blocks has a prestige value tied to that. So that is a value that's assigned sort of based off of how long it takes to acquire that block. So something like this sand over here actually has a negative value of, I believe, 2, whereas something over here that's this refined wood, it takes quite a bit of crafting and quite a bit of wood. This has a much higher prestige value. So, but over here you can see it's totaled all up, and then there's the final prestige. This is the value after this total bonus down here. And then in between there, you can see all the different percent bonuses that you get for different things. So there's one for variation. So the more different types of blocks that you use, the higher this should go. There's also an exotic ratio that's using blocks that come from other planets. As well as the size, which is literally how many plots you used, basically. And over here we have the build ratio. I believe this has to do with the ratio between what you have built and the natural terrain. I could be completely wrong on that. It seems to do kind of weird things when you place down just a beacon with nothing built in it versus something that is highly developed. So, and then also down here, there's the chisel ratio. So you don't get prestige directly from chiseling blocks, but if a certain percentage of your blocks are chiseled, then it makes your ratio, or it makes your chisel ratio go up. I believe this caps around 20-ish%, maybe 19. And then finally it totals it all down there. So you can kind of use this to micromanage / min-max your final prestige on your beacon if that's something you're particularly interested in. And then down here we have picked location. I've never actually seen this populated with any information. If you take a look here, if I look up into the sky, you can see that most of the menus that I have open up aren't even populated with information. So maybe I'm just not looking at the right thing to cause that area to populate, or it could be something that you need dev permissions to be able to actually view or something. Who knows? And still under selection and coming down to current chunks, there is a useful piece of information here for builders. It's this mesh blocks. And if you're unfamiliar, I mean, there's regular blocks and those are fairly low impact on the system, but anything that uses a mesh or as an entity, basically anything that's not a standard block, is a little bit more expensive to render. And a while back, they actually put a limit per chunk on how many meshes you can have. So as you can see right here, I have 225 meshes in this particular chunk. And a good thing to know about chunks is that they extend all the way from the top of the world down to the bottom of the world. So if you're building a tower and putting lots and lots of stuff in it, you might actually hit this limit fairly quickly. The limit is 512. So if you look here, just crossing, apparently this is the chunk line right here. And I even placed all of these flowers just to see if I could kind of max it out. And I couldn't quite reach that limit, but here is 438. Certainly if I continued to add floors to this particular chunk and piled it full of stuff, I would hit this limit pretty easily. But as long as you kind of spread out a little bit, it shouldn't be much of an issue. As you can see, you can just kind of look around my home, and most of my area struggles to even get above 200. So for the really serious builders out here, this would probably be a decent value to keep in mind and to make and monitor to ensure you don't accidentally overpopulate an area. Okay, so another thing I apparently am trying to forget about is this distance right here under selection. This is basically a rangefinder and I found it useful for measuring the range of sling bows in the past, but for builders this actually has a interesting application. I went ahead and placed 10 torches right here, and if I get right on the edge of the block here, you can see that it works pretty darn good. So it does have a little bit of a limitation that once it goes over 32 meters, that the whole selection section just disappears. So as you can see, it gets up to 31.7, and as soon as it reaches what would be 32, it's just gone. So so a little bit of a limitation, but still I could stand, say, right here, and okay, so that other point is about 15 meters away, probably. Saying 14.6, but so it can make measuring things a little bit easier to do once you get used to it. So quite nice. Down here at Game Worlds, this is kind of mildly useful. This basically tells you the different worlds that are connected via portals. So right here, it takes a little bit to interpret this, but you have the US East and then Ring, so that would be Volto. There's also EUC for European Central, and then Ring, so that would be Munting 7, as well as US West, and then Home, so that would actually be the planet we're on right now. So if we come over here, I believe another one will get populated. And I believe this is also affected by how many portals you have set to be open. So if you're unfamiliar, you can have portals that are open and then portals that are rendered. So I have it set to where I have only one portal at a time rendered, but then these two on the sides are probably technically open. So as soon as I look at them, they should render at least as fast as they can. But then over here, these are probably, have to wait a little bit for those to load up. So you can see that these portals are broken up into the planet that they go to, and then down here you can see information on the individual portal. So if there was multiple portals going to the same planet, they would all be, of course, under that planet. So pretty interesting. And down here we have profile. This lists your FPS and frame time, all this other cool stuff. Anything completely earth-shattering for the average player. And finally coming down to miscellaneous, there you can see the listed weather. So we have seeds, I guess number 2. So these are these little floaty seeds floating around. There's also some information on grapples, input, and then actual threat level is pretty useful for hunters. So if you're unfamiliar in Boundless, anytime you take like a hostile action against a creature or even healing other players, that increases your threat. And then whoever has the maximum threat is the person that will be targeted by pretty much everything in the area. So coming over here, I could resize this to where it only shows the threat levels, but as you can see, as I hit the spitter, threat level goes up. And there we go. So that is the threat that I gained from killing that spitter. And as you can see, it sticks around for a while. So I could actually travel off to a new area, and if there's a player that is already fighting and my threat happens to be higher than theirs, then the animal that they're fighting theoretically should change targets pretty quickly. This does eventually reset. I think it might be around a minute or 30 seconds, something like that. There it goes, it just reset. So I might throw up on the screen just how long that took. Simoyd actually made an awesome tool that pays attention to this value for you, and when it gets close to resetting, it gives you warnings and then finally does like a 5 or 10 second countdown that you're about to lose threat, which would be quite invaluable for anybody that's trying to tank during the community hunts. So pretty awesome. I'll probably throw a link to that in the description somewhere. Okay, well I think that covers the debugging menu pretty well. As you can see, there is a crazy amount of information in there, so feel free to dig through it and let me know if there's anything you find that you feel is particularly useful to players. And yeah, pretty awesome little tool. Anyway, this was Javita. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see more like this, and if there's anything you didn't like, please let me know down below. Also, if you like my channel and want to get cool perks, check out my Patreon page. Until next time, peace.